نحن مثل ما بتعرفوا السنة أسسنا Lebanese Business Council، مجلس رجال الأعمال في الكويت تحت رعاية السفارة اللبنانية بالكويت، وكان أول سنة بنعملها، وفعلا كان نخبة من رجال الأعمال والمصرفيين والمحامين وأصحاب الأعمال بالكويت. والهدف منها أنه نشجع الاستثمار بلبنان ونساعد بعضنا هون داخل الكويت، بس أهم شيء نشجع يعني نشجع الاستثمار والاعمال بلبنان، خاصه بعد الازمه اللي مرقنا فيها. شفنا انه امبارح طلع خطه اعاده يعني الريفورم بلان تبع الحكومه اللبنانيه، وفي كثير عالم عم يتساءلوا شو يعني، شو حيصير بودائعنا، كيف حيكون الجو بلبنان، هل حنقدر ننفذ. فطلبت من ثلاثه فعلا مميزين بانelists، دكتور هنري شاول، يعني تشرفت عرفت عليه 9 اواخر شهر 9 بال 2019، وكان جدا انسترومنتال بانه اعرف شو عم بيصير بلبنان، وافهم اكثر بكثير الازمه الاقتصاديه، وتحليل عميق بشو يعني شو الازمه الاقتصاديه، شو الحلول، وشو بيتطبق وما بيتطبق بلبنان. كمان دعيت دكتور سعاده الشامي. دكتور سعاده Group Chief Economist for National Bank of Kuwait. He's a veteran of the IMF, 20 years at the IMF, but also we have the best of both worlds. اشتغل بلبنان، كان رئيس الكابيتال ماركت اوثوريتي، هيئه اسواق المال بلبنان، وقبلها كان علم بالاي يو بي. ودكتور حسين شحرور يلي هو حاليا head of asset management for MENA بناشونال بانك اوف كويت. كمان قضينا وقت كثير نبحث بوضع لبنان ومستقبل لبنان. فهدول هن الثلاثه يلي قبلوا انه يكونوا موجودين، وبعتقد حيكون عندنا فكره كثير منيحه بعد حديثهم عن الوضع بلبنان. دكتور هنري، انا بحب بلش فيك، اذا في مجال توصف لنا. Can you describe for us what the plan is, what shaped it, in very simple word? What does it mean to us? What does it mean to our deposits? What does it mean to our future?
Okay, thank you, Ali, and thank you everyone for attending. I'm humbled with all these people that are on this webinar. I presume I have like 10 minutes or so to give you my side of the story. That
yes, correct. And we will spend a lot more on questions and answers, but please, yes.
Fair enough. So let me first let me situate myself. As Ali said, I've been involved. I'm an investment banker by practice and by experience. And I've been involved a little bit on the everything that's going on in the public life, mostly on a pro bono basis, trying to push the ball forward. And I've been advising the finance minister in the selection process of advisors, in the decision regarding Eurobonds, or the late decision in March. So, and in the debt restructuring negotiation that are going on, the government reform plan, and the upcoming banking restructuring exercise. So basically, whatever touches this crisis, it seems I'm in the eye of the storm. I'm not sure I have the answer to anything, but at least we try to move the situation forward. So let me situate the issue. The issue that we have in Lebanon, and unfortunately it has, and I'm sure in the question and answer a lot of this will come out, but it has an urgent nature to it today because of the liquidity crisis. Okay, that liquidity crisis is coming from an intersection of three problems, and where in the process of talking to the IMF, we belong to very, very few countries that has those three crises at the same time. Clearly, we have a balance of payment issue. So ability to source dollars, right? That's one. We have a debt sustainability issue, which is due to the fact that our debt is just completely unsustainable. We are at 170% of GDP. If you want to add to that the debt of the liability at the central bank level, we are at much higher level. And we have a banking system. Fundamentally, we have a banking system issue. So if you draw these three circles and you find Lebanon in the heart of it, that's the crisis of the problem. Now, this problem makes it that we need to address it very quickly. I would like to address it. I would have preferred to address it 5 years ago, 6 years ago, in changing the nature of the economy, of saying we need to change our business model, which we need to. But today, we do have an urgent crisis on our hand, which is this financial crisis. And that's why it is taking precedence in all the discussions, as opposed to dealing with the fundamentals of the economy. But I would love to be challenged on that particular topic and for us to discuss that. Today, what we have put together in order to address this liquidity issue is a reform program. This reform program is mostly a financial stability program. And it's saying, let me get into the financial system and see how can I attract money and new dollars to the system. The problem with this is that the financial system is full of losses. So you're all probably business people around here. And if you have a balance sheet where you have assets that are impaired, this will cause So the question I was saying, you're all business people, you all know how to read balance sheets. And the problem is that we have a balance sheet of Lebanon Inc., if you want. So the commercial banking system plus the central bank that has assets on it that need to be impaired. This kind of impairment is going to lead to basically losses to your equity, is going to lead to losses in the whole financial system. So we put together a plan that basically address those liquidity needs and address the stability of the financial system. At the heart of it is very simple. Is basically what happened yesterday, which I do believe was a momentous day, in the sense that we have the political establishment that has finally recognized that there's no solution outside of the IMF. Now, why did we get there? We got there because simply that we have no other way of attracting liquidity and attracting fresh dollars. The numbers are very large, okay? And when we look at the numbers, no matter how you slice them, dice them, and there was an earlier version of the program, and now we have another one, and I'm not going to get into a lot of details, but we basically have losses in the system that we're talking about roughly anywhere between 70 and 80 billion dollars. Put that in perspective. This is a number that is nearly twice the GDP of the country. This is a number that is 3.5 to 4 times the capital of the banks, of all the banks together. Okay, so the issue that we're having is that these losses are not going to be paid by anyone from outside of the Lebanese economy. This is the price that we're paying for a number of things that have happened. First, obviously, we've had government debt. We had a government that was full of corruption, mismanagement, put it in any way or shape you want. We have, on the other side, we have a central bank that has basically run effectively what I would call a Ponzi scheme, in the sense that they finance this government via the commercial banks through an interest rate policy and an FX peg, a foreign currency peg, that led to stealing for Jack to pay Joe, effectively. So those deposits kept on flowing into the system in order to pay for this debt. And it got us to where we are. And we have, third, a commercial banking sector that unfortunately, and we have a commercial banking sector, unfortunately, that has 60 to 65% of its asset exposed to the sovereign. Some of it in sovereign, in treasury bills and eurobonds, but a lot of it at the central bank. It's a unique country. Out of the $120 million of deposit, of US dollar deposit, about 75 or 80 billion are at the central bank. So the interlinkages between the central bank and the commercial banks, and obviously the depositor, are at the heart. These are the guys that are going to suffer. So when you look at what the solution that you need to have in this that the paper is suggesting, basically we have to figure out a way, because once you crush the losses, these losses, what does it mean? That means this is money that is gone. I'm sorry to say to everyone on this call, but the losses are basically for all of you guys are business people. So a loss is something that happened in the past. It's over. I cannot bring it back to life. Today, the question is, how are we going to finance those losses? Who's responsible for that loss? And a lot of people are saying, well, okay, the government spent the money, but let me give you a shocking number. Out of the stock of debt today, that is around $90 billion, okay? 95% of that is interest payment that have been incurred since 1993, I'm sorry. Okay, so from 93 to 2018, 95% of the interest payment paid during that period consists of 95% of the stock of debt. So the reality is, of course, if we didn't have the electricity problems, if we didn't have the bloated administration, we wouldn't have needed that debt. So the reality is somewhere in between. But we have been all guilty, we living in Lebanon, we Lebanese people, we who participated to the financial sector, have all been responsible for this problem. And today around the table, who's sitting? We have the banking sector, i.e. the shareholders of the banks, we have the depositors, and we have the state. Now, the problem with the state, let me start with that, is that the state can contribute only that much. Why am I saying that? Because 55% of the people in Lebanon do not have bank accounts. So they are not part of the financial system. So we have more than half of the country, okay, and probably 3/4 of the guys who are going down the streets. These guys do not have a bank account. So today, if we ask the state to, like some of the people are saying, I think someone needs.
I don't like mushrooms.
Okay, so so today, if we ask the state to contribute something, they can't contribute it to the banking system. They cannot contribute to the central bank, because that will be literally a theft from the rest of the people that have nothing to do with this crisis. On top of that, what the program has suggested is to do a sort of bail-in. And I don't know if people, not everyone is familiar with this word, but basically let the people who participated to the financial system to pay for those errors. Now, why am I saying that? I'm saying that for two reasons. Number one is that by doing that, you have to understand that the only thing we would be doing will be to put the financial system on a leveling field, which means we will be filling the hole, but we won't be financing the takeoff for the economy. So on top of that, what the government reform plan has said is that on top of that, we need roughly $30 billion to finance the takeoff of the economy over the next 3 to 4 years. So that is going to be additional weight or an additional burden for the people of the country. That's number one. Number two, in the program, we are leaving a central bank with some losses that will have to be recapitalized by the government, and we are using we're not using the gold, but we're using the capital gains. So we're marketing the gold, and we're using that extra valuation in order to dampen the level of the losses. So we are keeping a banking system or a BDL or a central bank that is largely exposed. So all these are going to be already a weight on the taxpayers, on the population at large. So with all this being put together, what do we think is going to happen? Because I think Ali wants me to address that. Look, the reality is that I do not see a solution practically without the IMF. That is, for me, from a technical perspective, it's impossible to consider. Okay? There will be no one willing, or even if we find a country or a set of countries willing to give us $10, $15 billion, and we're talking about huge numbers here, it won't be enough, because if you send that flow throughout the banking system, that money will be crushed. Why? Because we have 70 billion or so of losses. And if we do that and we don't harmonize the losses across the financial system, what will happen is that we will be continuously in the state that we are today, capital control that will take a long time, an economy that is taking the brunt of the work, a foreign exchange currency, an FX currency that will go, that I'm not sure what the ceiling of it will be. So for me, the solution is the IMF. And obviously that doesn't mean it's an easy solution. It's a magic wand and then tomorrow morning we'll wake up and nothing will happen. No, of course, there will be very, very arduous negotiation. There will be conditionality on that. And it will be tough for the next 3 to 4 years. But at the end of the day, as I was saying earlier, it will be a mix of solutions. So I think your deposits, any deposits, and I don't want to talk about numbers because I know the Prime Minister went on national TV and said, I want to protect 98% of the depositors, which means all the deposits that are above $500,000. I'm not sure, to tell you the truth, that this promise will be able to be kept all the way to the end. Why? Because we don't know what the losses are yet. We are starting an audit of the financial system, and we know from preliminary conversation with the IMF that actually the losses are larger than we have estimated. How much larger, I don't know yet. That's number one. So there will be a mix of solution. There will be, because of the quantum of the losses, there will be at the end of the day, some state contribution, whether we like it or not. There will be some deposit erosion, whether we like it or not. And there will need to be significant capital, a restructuring and injection of capital to save the banking sector. Now, and that is the best case story. Because I think in Lebanon, everything starts with politics and ends with politics. And the problem, getting this program through a parliament,
Ali, can I interrupt you for a second, because we're moving to a subject that I want you to comment on after the others. I mean, $85 billion or 70 to $80 billion of losses. That's absolutely humongous. I would equate that to what? Like it would be $40 trillion for the US. I mean, these are mind-boggling numbers. And when people look at them, second, we all have to pay. The IMF is needed. And the Prime Minister says 98% of the depositors are going to be paid. Will they be paid in US dollars or basically in Lebanese dollars, and at what exchange rate? So actually the haircut almost is embedded no matter what the number is. But having talked, you ended with the IMF is needed. I need to move to Dr. Saade, who is a veteran of the IMF. And Dr. Saade Chami, you know, how realistic is what we're expecting from the IMF and said? And I mean, we all talk about it as if, you know, they're coming in with billions of dollars. What are we talking about in amounts? And does it make a difference or not? Is it the amount that they will fund, or is it basically the program that comes along with it? So, Dr. Saade, the mic is to you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ali. Thanks for this great initiative. At the outset, I would like to say that, I mean, the program that was just approved by the cabinet, I think it is a comprehensive program. It is a candid, it is bold in its approach, and it touches on issues that usually are taboo in other situations. I think it is a good program. Now, is it a perfect program? Of course not. Now, the program basically has two main components. You have the macroeconomic policies component, macroeconomic stabilization, and you have the structural reforms. I would say that on the macroeconomic front, the program articulated well what's needed in terms of fiscal policies, in terms of monetary policy, exchange rate policy, and others. So the macroeconomic framework has four elements, and I think this is the elements that are usually discussed with the IMF. The first one is the fiscal policy, which means the budgetary policy. The second is monetary policy and exchange rate policy, external sector, and you have growth and inflation. So these are the main elements of any IMF program. Now, most of the macro measures are well articulated, are well thought of. The structural part of the program, I am afraid, is not as good, because what happened is, I think many things were thrown in at the end of the program without really having gone through each one of them and put some priorities, because you cannot have zillions of measures in the program, then the program will lose its credibility. So I think my guess is that some ministers in the cabinet, they want to have their footprint in the document. They asked to add these things. They added at the end of the program and also the document, and also in the appendix. So these are not well done, and I would have preferred to have a few crucial structural measures that they are time bound, because you cannot have measures like without any time frame, time bound and very specific, and these do not exist. Now let me tell you that the program was formulated with an IMF program in mind. I know this for sure from day one. When the Minister of Finance started to look into a program, he was asking himself what an IMF program would look like. And he was advised that you cannot go to the IMF empty-handed. You have to go with something to negotiate with the IMF. So from this point of view, I think the program is a good base for negotiations with the IMF. Now, would the IMF take this for granted and just give us money? Of course not. So I think the IMF will have to look into the program, will have to scrutinize every figure in the program, all right? I should say here that the program is internally coherent in the sense that the sectors are linked together in a consistent fashion. all right? But still, I think the IMF would ask for, in my humble opinion, they will ask for a few things. First, they will ask for, I would say, on the macro front, they will ask that the fiscal adjustment that is described in the program should be stronger and should be front-loaded, in the sense that you need to do more at the beginning in order to put your debt on a downward path. This is one. The second, I think the IMF will ask for, probably they will ask for immediate floating of the exchange rate. As you know, in the program, there are two issues in the final draft, which were different from the previous draft. One is the exchange rate, and the other one is the financial sector's reform. And I think the two are muddied in the program because of opposition within the cabinet to some of these measures. So the IMF would likely ask for.
Sorry, one is the exchange rate, and the other one is what?
The financial sector reform program.
You're breaking up, Saade.
The financial sector. Did you get it now? The financial sector that Henri talked about. The bank, the infrastructure in the banking sector, the sector structure in the central bank. So the IMF also will ask for some clarity on some of these measures that are in the program. For example, there are so many measures that are vague and they are not very specific. So the IMF will ask, okay, can you be more specific on these measures? Okay, in terms of taxes, in terms of fighting corruption, in terms of reducing waste, in terms of all these measures that are in the program, the IMF will need some clarity on this. And then why do they need the clarity on these issues? Because as you know, when the IMF formulates a program with the country, what they do, they have to have some conditionality, and they have, as Henri said, and also they have to have what we call, what I used to call quantitative and structural performance criteria and benchmarks, which mean these are the criteria against which the program will be assessed whether the program is successful or not. So they have to have a set of specific measures in the program in order to go to the board of the IMF to ask for approval of the program. So all these, I think the IMF will ask for. Now, so as I said, I mean, the IMF has to have some conditions. Now, I think I should have started by saying, would the IMF receive this program in a positive manner? I would say yes. I think the program is bold, is very comprehensive, but it needs a lot of work for the IMF to give money to Lebanon. Now, what kind of IMF program we are expecting? As you know, there are many facilities in the IMF, and I would say that Lebanon could qualify for something called Extended Fund Facilities, EFF. And normally this is a program for 3 years, but could go up to 4 years. The latest one in Jordan went for 4 years, for example. And the amount of money that the IMF could provide really depends on many things. It depends on Lebanon's quota in the IMF, depends on the financing needs of the country, and depends on whether the program is strong enough. So all these factors will be taken into account to determine how much money we should lend to Lebanon. Just to give you an example, Lebanon has a quota with the IMF. A quota is, this is whatever you pay when you subscribe to the IMF, when you become a member of the IMF. The IMF quota is something like 633 million SDRs, or something like close to $900 million. Normally, under a normal access, the maximum you can get is about 435% maximum, which means that if you get this amount, you get something like $3.8 billion. This is under a normal access. But in many cases, countries can get exceptional access. And I think given the financing needs of Lebanon, the huge needs of Lebanon, and if the program is strong enough, I think the IMF would be willing to give exceptional financing to Lebanon. And this could go up to I would say 10 times the quota, but this is a bit of a stretch in my view, because look at Egypt. Egypt got 430%. Only Argentina got 1,100%, because Argentina. It's not a good example to give, but this is what happened. So, in the best scenarios, we can get up to 8 billion, okay, 9 billion, but this is really a far-fetched. I would say let's be modest in our expectations, and say that probably we'll get something like $4 to $5 billion dollars. But what's important is not the IMF money. This is a seed money for other multilaterals and bilateral donors. And as you know, the Europeans are willing to chip in. The World Bank will definitely be in the program, because the IMF and the World Bank, they coordinate their efforts before they go to the country for a program. So all this, I think, will make the program goes well with the IMF board. This is in a nutshell. Now, what I would just say one thing about whether the program is realistic or not, because I think the program, as you said, is very comprehensive, very ambitious. But I think there are some issues that we need to be aware of. First, I think it is a bit optimistic on some of the measures. I think you cannot really reduce the budget deficit to almost zero by 2024. It's very, very difficult. The balance of payments, the what's called the financing requirement, the financing gap, and I think the government did a good job in identifying the financing gap, which is one of the requirements for the IMF. That's why I said the IMF, this program was designed with an IMF program in mind. And it's about, as Henri said, it's about $30 billion. What is the financing gap? Is what the government is expected to receive in foreign currency minus what is expected to pay. So you define the financing gap. And the IMF will not go into the country until the financing gap is fully paid for by IMF and other donors. So there's a lot of work to mobilize other donors to join in. Now, the program also is a bit unrealistic on some of the assumptions, especially when it comes to using, this capturing or recapturing the stolen money, fighting corruption, and so on. I think these are entrenched in the system. It will take a long time for these to be returned, if at all. And I don't think this could be done unless you do it by force. I wouldn't say who, who. So. But I don't think this will happen in a country, in a sectarian and a confessional country like Lebanon. So I think it's a bit. And the third element is that this program will face a lot of opposition. Okay, first of all, it will be opposed by the public, because I think if I were the prime minister, I would have said, listen, you Lebanese. Buckle up, tighten your seatbelt. It's going to be a rough ride. It is a very, very rough ride. This will take us years to go back where we were. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It is a very difficult adjustment period. We have all to pay the price. Everybody has to pay the price. And the public has unrealistic expectations of what could be done from the government. I think we are facing a revolution of inflationary expectations. I think it is too much to expect from this program. And I would also say that the IMF program is not a magic bullet. There are so many countries that have an IMF program and failed miserably. Argentina is the latest one of them. So it's not. So it depends on the commitment of the authorities to the program, on their ability to implement the program. And I think this is a bit difficult in Lebanon, given the political parties and what's going on in the country. And I should say also, this is not the first program to be prepared by Lebanese government. I was part of the Paris 3. I was heavily involved. And it has all the good elements. We got pledges for $7 billion. Nothing came to the country because we could not implement anything. So I hope, let's be helpful that we can. But I mean, there are a lot of turbulence on our way.
Dr. Saade, thank you very much. So in your view, this has been tailor-made for the IMF to accept it. It expects a negotiation with the IMF and the pushback. So it is not hard enough, and we expect basically a pushback from the IMF. The government will have a hard time basically meeting the expectations. I've noticed that the plan expects a negative reserve balance in 2021, which is kind of quite a bit scary for me. One question I am begging to ask for someone, maybe you, Dr. Saade, can answer it. There is a lot of talk around town that basically the IMF will put some political, or there are implied political strings attached to their involvement. How realistic is this? I mean, people say, unless you have a major, basically, change in the political structure and dilute the influence of some, the IMF will not come in. What do you think of that?
It's a very good question, Ali. I think I hear a lot of talks in the media, on talk shows, and especially those who don't want the IMF to come, that probably the IMF will not accept to come because of political factors. Let me say that as you know, the IMF has 189 members. It's supposed to be a political organization, it's supposed to treat every country on equal footing. It is supposed in this article of agreements, we call them, that they have to really help countries get out of their balance of payments crisis. So I would say that given this, I spent 20 years and I negotiated the programs with many countries. I never experienced any pressure on me to for example, not to go to the board with the program, or I didn't see, even when I was grilled at the board about issues, I never faced a blatant, I would say blatant political pressure one way or the other. Now, I would be foolish to say that there are no major players in the IMF. There are, because and the board of the IMF, there are 24 board members representing the whole world. And I think the largest shareholder is the United States. It has more than 16 point something of percent of the total vote. So the United States can influence decisions, but has to be supported by other countries, especially Europeans and the major shareholders. And the way I see it now, every country in Europe is asking Lebanon to go to the IMF. Even the Americans are saying that, you have to go to the IMF. So given taking all this together, I don't see any problems for the program to sail through the board without much political interference.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saade. I need to move to Dr. Husayn. You've heard basically what Henri said about we have to pay the price, the depositors, and definitely the larger depositors will have to pay the bigger share. And these are typically the depositors that fund the economy, that invest in Lebanon. And what other options can you think of? I mean, I'm sure the plan has a lot of latitude in it. What other options do you foresee that we, people can argue for?
First, thank you, Ali, for putting this together. Much appreciated. So I guess my part is to dig more deep into what Henri spoke about in terms of the impact on our deposits. So first, I want to agree with everybody here that no matter what you call what we already have, a haircut, you can call it a pedicure, it doesn't matter what you call it. The fact is that the value of the deposits in Lebanon are currently below what you have on the screen, and below by a significant amount. I would say anywhere between 30 to 60%, and that depends on the person. So if you're a person with a small deposit, it's probably a smaller haircut that you already have, or a reduction in value, so to speak. Or if you're someone who's not loaded with real estate and you want to buy real estate, it's probably on the lower end. If you're loaded with real estate, you're probably on the higher end. So the real question in my mind is not whether we will have a haircut. The question is whether the existing haircut or reduction in value will be reinforced by any program or will be lifted partially or fully. That's what we're talking about. The haircut is already here. Will we get it out or will it be reinforced? The next question that people may have, probably the most interesting and important question for many people who have deposits in Lebanon, is what does the current economic and financial package has a good plan to lift existing haircut? Do we have any plan in the current package? And the answer is a definite no, without any doubt. In fact, the current draft reinforces the haircut, despite all the political talk about no haircut and so on. So let me tell you how I look at it. So to do that, let's dissect a bit the numbers. First, I want to go back to Henri's numbers. I know there were different numbers in terms of the losses that the banking system as a whole, ex-BDL, has to absorb basically. And the numbers are in anywhere between 80 and 60, but I think the 60 figure is probably in the latest draft has left more losses at the BDL. So let me take the numbers that everybody knows by now, which is the 83 billion. And let me round it down just to be nice to the depositors to 80 billion. Okay, if we round it down to 80 billion, basically the plan calls for what we call a full bail-in of the current shareholders of the banks, including preferred shares, etc., and debt, ex-deposits. And as per the numbers, this is basically around $20 billion. Okay, so the bank owners lose all their capital, and we are left with 60 billion. And I'm assuming here the banks will accept this. I know we will hear from the Lebanese Banking Association very soon. Some banks actually are in a tough position to defend it. Other banks may have better positions. So it's going to be a bank-by-bank situation. But let's just, for the sake of argument, let's accept it that out of the 80, we're gone with 60 billion. Now, the plan gives you three options as a depositor. Okay, first, what you call bail-in of the banks using large deposits. Second is what they call tradable equity stakes in a special recovery fund, which we get sort of stolen assets and so on. And the third option is they take a long-dated subordinated debt with the banks. So let me first rule out the third option as a double counting. You can bail in the banks and sell the banks to the depositors and then attach to the banks a $40–50 billion liability. So that's actually an afterthought. So for me, option 3 is nonsense, to say the least. Option 2, okay, tradable equity stake in a special recovery fund that will have all the stolen assets in it. For me, it will trade at a zero price. So pretty much you have one option, which is to get probably shares in the banks. So you have $60 billion of deposits that are fighting for shares in the banks. The good question that no one probably has put a number to is how much that the bail-in of the banks by depositors, after we kick out the owners of the banks, sorry for the word, how much can the banking system take from these 60 billion deposits? I ran a few numbers, and I'll be generous, okay? The banking system in Lebanon from 2011 to 2015, the 5-year average for the earnings for the banking sector is around $2 billion. And that's before the financial engineering. So I took something before the so-called financial engineering. So $20 billion, I would assume that the top of the range for the banking sector in Lebanon with a resized balance sheet over the next few years is going to be $1 billion, no more than $1 billion per year, in my humble view. If I multiply that $1 billion by 10 for a PE ratio of 10 for the risk of Lebanon, I have a banking sector that is worth of $10 billion. Now, one can come and say it's 15, not 10, and so on. As you know, rounding the $2 billion is not a big deal. So $10 billion, these $10 billion, you'll have to bring some of the owners of the bank back to the bank, probably by asking them to recapitalize the banks. So let's split this 10 between the depositors, 50-50 stake, and new capital, fresh capital, which we need significantly from the current bank owners, from their Swiss account, so to speak. So now we are left with $55 billion hole, okay, even after the bail-in of the banks by depositors. So let me set the stage here. Let me summarize what we have now. As per the plan, and after the bail-in of the bank owners and the deposits owning 50% of the banks and recapitalizing of the banks, we are left with $50 billion hole that has two players only. The government, because the government kicked out all the bank owners, they also excluded BDL because they have passed the losses of BDL or most of it to the banks. And you have some depositors, we call them, for the sake of be consistent with the paper, large depositors. So you have the government and the large depositors have to somehow come back with the $55 billion. Okay. Now, the problem I have, I think we have a fundamental disagreement with Henri. First time I meet Henri, and hopefully we'll have more debates later. First, we have to define, we have a game of two players, a government and large depositors. But let's agree, who are these guys? Who have to find a $55 billion sort of package, so to speak. So you have a government represented by all its branches. I'm not talking about the cabinet of Prime Minister Diab. I'm talking about the government with all its executive, legislative, judicial system. Everybody in the government is responsible for this mess, okay, including the voters who voted what Henri called our Lebanese people, who voted these corrupt politicians in the system. So they are responsible for their actions. And so this is the first party, the party responsible for the mess. And you have the party that's being عم بيشيطنوه يعني بالmedia, that's called the large depositors. So let me talk about the large depositors to understand also, so that we know where the game is. We can't change the rules of the game in the middle of the game. Large depositors, we're talking about roughly 50,000 accounts. Sometimes the media confuses accounts and account holders. These are accounts, okay, above $500,000, okay? These 50,000 accounts, let's assume 20% of these guys are the bad guys, just for the sake of argument. 10,000 accounts are the bad guys. And if someone argues it's more than that, then we have to go back to the banking system in Lebanon, and we probably will be banned with dealing with any bank in the world. Okay, if we have out of 50, 20% to be PEPs exposed that are stolen money and so on. So that means 80% of the large depositors that are being عم يتشيطنوا بالmedia are the hard-working Lebanese working outside Lebanon, the expats in the Gulf, in Africa, in Europe, in America. These are the successful expats, many of you attending this call. You have the successful Lebanese residing in Lebanon who took the risk of Lebanon and basically either did the small business, or they are the successful doctors. Actually, we seek their help. If we have a heart attack in Kuwait, we run to Middle East Airline to fly to AUH. These are the people we are talking about. The school owners, the restaurant owners we enjoy when we go to Lebanon. These are the 40 out of the 50,000 accounts holders, okay? So now we have this is the game for this 55 billion. So let's assume the large depositors, because they're nice guys, okay, they want to prove goodwill. They say, okay, we're going to contribute part of our excessive interest, which is spoken, because we took the risk, we're going to be responsible for our action. We're going to give you part of the excessive interest for the past, whatever, 5, 10 years, etc. And there aren't good numbers for this, but let's assume for the sake of argument, it's somewhere between 15 and 25 billion. I'm going to use the $20 billion flowbacks of excessive interest from these accounts so that we are left with a $35 billion hold. And my view, the only way there will not be any crime against, what I call a crime against large depositors in Lebanon, these are the backbone of our economy, is that the government has to chip in $35 billion. Okay, I don't care personally where the government is going to get this money from. I have some ideas, but I think they need to find a way to find $35 billion. So we're going to create a fund that's going to put part of the gold in it, part of prime real estate, and some rights given to this fund that all equate to, let's say, 35. Of course, the number is an assumption, so it could be 40, it could be 30, etc. Okay, what kind of rights I'm talking about? So I think Lebanon is in a very, very tough situation. I would compare it no less than the 1990s. We have more than a war currently in terms of economic impact on people. I lived the war in the 80s, and I know what we're facing now. In the war, people who had deposits in the bank could reach to their deposits. Currently, you don't have money, the currency is depreciating, and you can't even access your deposits. So, for example, we need big ideas. I just thought over, honestly, half an hour with the help of a good friend today, actually, just to put some numbers together. For example, if the government gives the rights of having a touristic city on the beachfront by reclaiming land 3 times the size of the Normandy, okay, with all the sort of the top-notch conditions, etc., that will fit the best standards, this will bring probably around $20 billion. With the gold and additional land, you could reach out to $35 billion. Just that small idea I came up with a friend just today, actually, is just 3.5% of the size of the reclaimed land of Dubai. 3.5%. That's all what you need to give the rights to this fund. So I'm talking about a genuine fund that has genuine assets that can be traded at $35 billion in order to solve this problem. Otherwise, the crime will be against the large depositors. And in my plan, or the plan I'm discussing now, people would say, what about all al-amwal al-muhawwala wal-manhuba wal-mawhuba wal-masruqa and all of this? I say, you can't have the depositors bearing this responsibility. So it is a very easy solution. This fund that is owned by the depositors is going to give the government a call option to buy back these assets, either gold or land or rights to build the city, etc., at the current price, at the inception price, within a period of 3 years. So the government has 3 years to get all the al-amwal al-muharraba wal-manhuba wal-mawhuba, etc., and buy back its assets. So you're giving the whole system, politicians, judicial, executive, legislative, 3 years period to get their act together, to deserve their assets back. And you're giving the voters also 1 round of election in order for them to be able to vote those politicians who do not act and get their act together. If I may finalize my point by saying, just in conclusion, if you run the numbers, somehow the government has to come back with $35 to $40 billion. I think it's immoral if we blame only the large depositors, in my view. And otherwise, we'll have a real problem in Lebanon, starting in a new Lebanon on immoral grounds, in my view. Thank you, Ali.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Husayn. Definitely, it's a very different angle. You're talking about justice to those who have, in effect, funded Lebanon in the past 10, 15 years. Yani, I would say up to, correct me if I'm wrong, yani, you all know better the numbers, I think up to 2018 or 19, remittances were about $7 billion per year. That's a substantial amount. The plan, I think, calls for about $3 to $4 billion per year. So we need to continue to tap into expatriates' money. We need their investments to basically build an economy. So definitely they need to vote. But having said that, I need to ask the three of you, and I'm going to start basically with Ali, and then maybe Saade, and then Husayn. You know, what is economically necessary, and I think we all have our different views. Yani, Tino just sent me a question saying, what about the rights of the future generations? Indeed. So what is economically necessary from preventing a total collapse of the economy may be politically challenging from an execution point of view. What is sellable? I mean, is what Husayn said sellable? It's not costing much to people in cash out. I mean, this is dead asset. We create new assets. We give it to the depositors. Plus, I mean, the plan as is. I mean, we have 300,000 employees in the government. I mean, these are hurt substantially more than the large depositors. Why should they accept? So what is politically sellable here, in your view, Ali?
Okay, well, first, thank you. I want to thank Husayn for the challenge he's posing here. And obviously, let's put the plan in perspective, right? The plan, we started working on the plan in mid-March, okay? We're at the end of April or whatever, 1st of May. And so you can imagine that a lot of ideas have not been fleshed out, especially when it comes to, you know, bail-in versus bailout, who should pay, and things like that. And let's not put the carts before the cart before the horses on that particular topic. This is a topic that, in my mind, is very explosive, that can lead to security issues. We all know that part of that subset of large depositor are a mix of politicians, former warlords, whatever you want to give them, what kind of categorization you want to give them. And there are also angry, frustrated, and poor people that have nothing to do with it in the streets. The World Bank has basically projected that 50% of the people are below the poverty line. So there is a real issue that we need to discuss here that would need literally an extensive dialogue, and it's not something that will be discussed and can and should be discussed behind closed doors. So the first thing I want to say is that on one end of the spectrum, if you want to start with principles, okay, the depositors are unsecured depositors. Okay, those depositors have taken a risk by putting the deposits in Lebanon. They have earned interest on it. They've earned abnormal level of interest on it. Therefore, they knew the risk level that they were facing on it. There's a reason why, and I don't understand why people think that deposit should be sacred. Okay, deposits are a financial investment, and I understand. That's why I'm describing the one end of the spectrum. I'll come to the other end of the spectrum. But you have to understand that depositors have put money, earned a level of interest, took a level of risk, and that level of risk exploded in their face. At the same time, the bank have taken that money and have taken exposure in a corrupt state be it by buying Eurobonds or T-bills, okay, or putting money at the central bank. That debt is a non-recourse debt. That debt has literally no recourse. Now, is it fair? Is it unfair? You know, it's a process that will need to be defined. As I said at the beginning, so I'll come back to that. On the other end, these are the people, or a subset of those people, I understand. There are retirees, there are people, there's the expat community, and there's a mix of that. And we will need that in order to rebuild the country on a long-term basis. I understand all that. Probably, if we were talking about a loss in the system of 20 billion, I don't think we would be having this conversation. Honestly, even if it was the loss in the system was 30 billion, we would not be talking about this, because I think the depositor will take that bill and say, hey, it's okay. The problem, the losses are so large that the early indication of it is that it's so big, and the early indication of it is saying that it's going to go much higher than that. Okay, and I can't reveal too much, but apparently there's maybe another pocket of 20 to 25 billion that we may find in the system. That, in my mind, there will be, at the end of the day, as a result of a national dialogue, there need to be everyone will have to pitch in, from the depositors all the way to the state. But we need to establish principles here. We cannot start by telling the state, who has 55% of unsecured people, of people who are not in the financial system, that we're going to use that money to bail out the depositors. It just won't work. This is a civil war in the making. Okay? The principle ought to be that, okay, fine, there's a financial system. Let me just say one thing. By the way, the bailout is there are red lines being put on using state assets for cleaning up the mess by the international community. And be it the IMF, be it France, who is sponsoring all the international support group, and they've put that, and this is an information and it's not an analysis, they've put at stake unlocking the IMF and Saade money if this is going to be the start of the conversation. So this will not happen. We will not have, and I don't know, people maybe on all ends of the political spectrum here, but we are not going to have another Solidaire here. We are not going to have another what is called the frontal properties theft. The international community will not accept that there will be an exchange of state assets to bail out 20,000 or 40,000 or even less the number that that Husayn has mentioned. They have put a red line. There has been communication at the highest level, and that's why at some point in the discussions in Lebanon, bailout took the precedence, and that was not put in the document. I have to agree that a lot of these ideas going after stolen money, all the audits, and as you can see, there has been a lot of decision from the cabinet today over the last few days, in order to go after stolen money. So to go after the audits of state contracts and so forth, because we know we're getting to a point, and we're starting to do it right now, because we're going to get to a point where we could allocate a piece of that money in order to compensate depositors. That is more fathomable than just saying, let's take a piece of land and give it to depositors. One last point that we would be amiss of not talking about it, because it's in everybody's mind, okay, which is the confessionalism in which we're living, okay? Depositors, the large deposits, whether we like it or not, has a confessional lines around it. the ownership of the banks have that also. And unfortunately, those two are not the same. There's a lot of political opposition to say, what are we doing, guys? Okay, are you going, and this is why it's really crazy, the discussion that is going on as to, and that's why I said it's explosive as a conversation, and that's why it needs to be taken with a level down by people who are really, really apolitical, to try to think about how we're going to solve the problem in which we are. I do not have an answer to that. But the risk of having this discussion slip into become a security issue is very high, and we need to avoid that at all costs. So that's all I have to say for now, and probably let other people also respond to it.
Well, thank you very much, Henri, and it's very clear that also basically the holders of the Eurobonds will say, okay, why are you disposing of state assets to depositors and not to us? And,
exactly.
Wait a minute here. I mean, you can use this money to reduce your fiscal deficit, and by the way, you have a future generation to think of. I mean, I hear you here, Henri. And that is a reality, and so basically the political arena outside has a lot of resistance to that, to what Dr. Husayn is proposing. Dr. Saade, can you really comment on the political resistance? I mean, everything. I mean, the plan is good, and for me, any plan is a good plan. Yeah, within reason, any plan is a good plan that can be executed and then can save Lebanon from a total collapse. So how politically realistic is this plan? I mean, you said it before. You've had several plans that hit a wall when it came to the political arena. So can you comment on that based on what you have faced in the past?
Yeah, thanks, Ali. I think this crisis, I think, different than any other crisis we faced in the past. Let's admit this, and the solution is going to be much more difficult than any crisis we faced in the past 30 years. So, put it this way: I think you have two options. Either you go with the reform program and everybody agrees to it, or you will have total collapse, total meltdown. Now, given the political structure and the confessional system that we have in the country, I'm afraid that any actions that would, for example, touch one person who stole money, will generate a response on the streets and would lead to social unrest. I am not too confident. I'm really cautious in what I'm saying now because I don't want to be too pessimistic. I think we need to have hope. I think if this government proceeds with the IMF program and all the measures that will come with it, there will be reactions on the streets. People will go on the streets. People don't understand these concepts. People think that the government is, they have a lot of money. They can distribute money left and right without any repercussions. And the politicians will use some of the people on the streets to their own advantage. I think this is a plausible scenario. Even in countries like Greece, how many governments it took because everybody, government resigned and then replaced by another government. I think we will have probably one government, two governments, three governments before we can have something solid on the ground. So there is hope, but I am afraid that the political system we live in, the country we live in, is in such a disarray that we have to be very cautious and we have to be a bit more skeptical about what's going to happen. But the program as it is, if it is enforced, it will lead to good results, at least on the macroeconomic fronts. On the banking sector restructuring, I tend to agree with Henri that, and I think in discussion with Husayn before, I said that we should not really mortgage the future generation to bail all depositors. And I agree that depositors who took risk, they should pay some of the price. I'm sorry to say this. I know my family, they have money in the banks, and I know what I'm talking about. I sympathize with all those who have deposits, but the risk is there. And, banks fail in every country in the world, right? They fail. And then, of course, that's why you have deposit insurance. But unfortunately,
Dr. Saade, but that's systemic, right? I mean, this is not one, one.
Yes.
This is a systemic failure. I mean,
Right. Anyway, but to end, I think there is some hope, but there is this a ray of hope, I would say, but I think it is going to be very difficult, right?
Yeah.
Ali, can I say just one thing?
Sure.
I think we need definitely to move in parallel, as auditors are going to be storming the country and auditing and confirming the losses. I think we need to think out of the box and to start thinking in terms of this bail-in, bail-out, and what is workable and what is not workable, and bring this whole debate in the public in order to get a bit of marketing here. You probably have seen the article I've written that was published over the weekend, titled "No to Intergenerational Theft." And I think what we need a new social contract. This country needs a new social contract. We need a new mu'tamar ta'sisi, as we say, and we need to understand, how we're going to finance those losses, and this needs to come as a result of a national consensus. It cannot be done by the old guys, behind four walls. It cannot be done just by apparatchik. It cannot be done just by, finance professionals. We all need to be involved in this. And I think everyone has a point of view, but I don't think anyone has an answer that will ensure stability and future growth for the country. And that is a dialogue that needs to be sponsored by some organization or a set of organization and really take precedence, because this is as important as the fight for independence, because this is so fundamental to defining what the Third Republic is going to look like, that it's worth spending a lot of time on it by all the different parts of the society.
Absolutely, Ari. Look, I mean, I totally agree that it's about the time for us to have a new social contract. But what I keep saying is, we probably need founding fathers, and there has been several attempts here to gather some wise men around to come up with a new social contract that can address these issues. And without that, yes, I mean, just listening to what everyone is saying. True, Husayn, we've always discussed, and you've always been the most realistic among us. For this thing to move forward and for money to come back, trust has to, trust is the foundation. And actually, without trust, I would say no political stability, and politically, the plan will not be accepted if we don't trust in the plan and those who are going to execute it. How can we make it politically acceptable in Lebanon? I mean, we don't have time for a new social contract, because I would say it will come eventually, hopefully within 2 years. But currently, how would we do it?
Thank you, Ali. Just to add to the conversation with Dr. Saade, which we debated often, and with Henri, we just debated now. So talking about social contracts, what kind of social contracts are we starting without being fair to a part of our depositors? The main issue I have with the current plan is not based on any legal or moral grounds. If that's the case, everybody took risk, the small and the big. Why are you excluding 90–80% of the depositors, which I agree with, by the way? But why are you excluding them? Not because of legal or they don't have recourse or whatever, just because of politics. You don't want them to be on the streets. So you can't start a social contract was being unfair to part of the economy. And actually, you're asking the large depositors to bail out the small depositors on your behalf. If the government really had to intention to bail out the small depositors, they should bring money from their own pocket to bail the 98% of small depositors, which again, I agree with. However, you can't have different rules in the game or changing the rule for different players. That's my and that's a long debate. I think it's for me it's a moral debate. It's a social contract debate. It's how do we start a new Lebanon?
Correct.
Ali, I've been very positive. Sorry, not very positive actually. More positive than the average, less negative. But let me tell you what I think now after seeing going through the details of this program. Unfortunately, the more you crunch the numbers, the more you go over all the measures that are being implemented. I'm afraid that the current cabinet is not leaving any group happy. Okay, so very quickly, Labour are not happy because you have a deterioration. Actually, you're smashing their purchasing power and they're losing their jobs. Middle class is losing purchasing power and they cannot access their savings. Rich people are risking losing 50% of their savings. Businesses across all sectors are being hurt by more taxation, inflation, reduced demand, and so on. So, and on top of all of this, you have the across party divides, sectarian and religious, and so on, and class divides. The only good news in our situation, the only good news is the very bad news, which is we have no other choice but a total collapse. That's the only thing that will move us forward. I think we will have to move forward the first leg of the IMF program, which I think we will do. And Dr. Saade enlightened us today about what is needed and so on. I think this part we will get. But going through the whole program and succeeding is, I have a huge doubts on. And I think we need 180 degree. We need basically, in my mind, we need either a miracle or 180 degree change in political behavior across the spectrum, which is a miracle by itself. So I will bet on the first miracle. Just to be positive on this, I think Lebanon has always been the land of miracles. So maybe we get a miracle and we pull this through. Otherwise, it's going to be very challenging.
Okay, we run out of time.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you, Dr. Husayn. We run out of time, but I have one question that I'm begging someone to answer. Let's suppose they say the net effect is about 50% haircut. So someone with $1 million end up with $500,000 in the bank. Will this be $500,000 in US dollar or in Lebanese dollars? And will that person be able to take it and run with it, or he will be stuck in Lebanon for a while?
Can I answer
well,
it?
That's an easy answer. Go ahead, Hussein. Go ahead.
Okay, Henri, you can answer very quickly. The other 50, that's the problem. The other 50 is conditional on all these other programs that we're running, right? In order for you to get the other 50, you need the IMF program to succeed. You need all the measures to be implemented so that our sustainable debt level continues to be sustainable. So you don't go back and chip in again for the other 50. So the answer is no, 50 won't make it. It is you have so many ifs to get your other 50.
Okay, Ali.
I would tend to agree.
I agree.
I would tend to agree. Actually, if you were to do today, if a 50% haircut would stabilize the system, you still have to get all the external funds to get the economy going. You'll have capital controls for a few years. I mean, before you will be able to put your hands on those real dollars. Let's not kid ourselves. That's why I was saying the losses are losses. So whatever you're going to get back will take some time. Greece just came out from capital control last October, if my memory serves me well. So it took them the better part of 7 to 8 years before they lifted capital controls. So
that's a long way.
At least there's one thing we agree, Hussein and I, on.
All right, Ali. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure There are lots of discussions that we can follow up on, including many questions I got. How do you float the Lebanese pound? Why not privatize basically the infrastructure in Lebanon and then let investors invest in it? How do we dispose of our dollars, actually Lebanese dollars? Are there some good investment opportunities? But there are many subjects that we can follow up on later. I really thank you, Ali, for taking the time. Dr. Saade, thank you so much, and Dr. Husayn.
Thank you all, and Ali, just one parting word. If someone wants to reach out, has ideas, would like to discuss something, I'd be more than happy to convey that message, to hear it out, and to try to build a dialogue around it. So please feel free to give my contact to anyone. And we need feedback, we need answers, we need ideas.
Okay, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Ali, for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.